Today we have another fantastic guest. His name is Pascal, and he's the CEO of 3IQ. How are you doing, brother?
Doing amazing, as you can imagine, but thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely, dude. So, for people that don't know, you guys just launched another ETF there in Canada. This is an XRP spot ETF.
Yes.
So, congratulations on that. Um, but let's take a step back for a second. I just want to kind of give people an idea of maybe who you are and how you got into the position here at 3IQ.
Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about myself and talk a bit about the history of
Yeah.
3IQ because they definitely are melted together. So my career spans all the way back in the beginning of the web. When I give a keynote, I have this actually, I have a book here. It's a yellow pages of the internet. So bought that back in the late 90s when you didn't have Google, Alta Vista was just starting, and you kind of needed literally yellow pages to navigate the web.
Ah,
But what the web enabled us, right, is sort of like this broad-based access to information, young minds dreaming of what could happen. And during that time where I grew up in Ottawa, Canada, was called Silicon Valley North. So back then we had direct flights to San Fran. American VCs were here all the time. We had Nortel, we had Corel, we had all these big names competing with large global players. So it was a super cool time to grow up and be in the space. Like recruiters were at campus doors giving young students contracts to, ditch university and just join their companies. So that kind of crazy day, right? So my career started in the middle of all this. I've always loved business, but I always loved what technology can bring. So fast forward a few years, had a successful venture startup at 19. Didn't really know what I was doing, but really was able to recruit a really cool team. Got lucky in terms of where we were in the market cycle with the web craziness. But then I really started diving into the okay, uh, where is this going? Where's the web going? And today we talk about Web three. We're talking about XRP and what's happening on chain and where all these projects enabling. But people used to say, "Oh, Web three is just a marketing thing." I'm like, no, Web two was a thing, and I show them pictures because then Web two came along, and what Web two brought was, the internet was exciting, but if you didn't know how to code, it really didn't give you access, right? So Web two transformed all that. You had open source, you had basically, Java and REST APIs and all these things that allowed users to create interfaces so that you and I didn't need to know how to code. And all of a sudden, the advent of open source, high speed internet, and that transformed the world to all these platforms that we see today, the Amazons, the Googles, the Facebooks, right? So then I had a business during that time that really scaled and became quite successful. And all of a sudden, after sold that one, I discovered Bitcoin and digital assets very early in my career because of the open source work I was doing. So, Bitcoin and crypto is open source. It was something that was very, sort of talked about in the space I was hanging out in. And so I became enamored by the technology that was going to bring, and sort of foreseeing a lot of the problems that it could solve that Web 2 didn't solve, like access to online payments and banking and all these things. And so fast forward to where I was in my career 20 years after I started, there's a little company in Canada called 3IQ that I discover online. Basically, I was actually talking with my father. He knew I was in Bitcoin, and he was talking to me about like, how do I make a push to have enough to retire on? He's like, I don't want to rely on you. You've been successful. How do I take what I've saved and the bad advice that I got from all the banks over the years, and how do I turn into something using crypto? And the problem in Canada is that all of his assets were in a registered account. And so we started to do math on the taxes that would have to pay and all that stuff. And I'd all of a sudden discover, I'm like, there's this company called 3AQ. They're suing the regulators. And if they pull it off, they're going to be the first to launch this product that you'll be able to invest into these registered accounts. So started following the story. Lo and behold, they pull it off. These products are launched. We are the first in North America to have a regulated product, and was able to allocate to Bitcoin in a registered account. So my exposure in my career started before 3IQ. I got exposed to 3IQ before, and then the funny is our paths actually crossed. So I became known for scaling companies in Canada, disruptive, high speed, disrupting companies in technology. And 3IQ had just gotten and won the right to launch these products. And the founders were like, who can we bring in to help scale this company? And that's how we've been.
Perfect fit. There you
Right,
go.
perfect fit, right? So I knew where the space was going. And Web3 to me was just a natural progression of Web2 and Web1, which is where I spent my 20 plus year career. And I fell in love with 3AQ because of the mission that it took on. And so, yeah, that's basically the history of the company in terms of we were the first to pull it off. That's my history. And then since then, we continue to make history because we really believe in the space. And so we can keep challenging the regulators. We keep working with counterparties to bring more innovative products to market. And like you mentioned, just this week, we've been successful with XRP.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So there was 3 ETFs that did get approved this week. You guys were one of those, and you guys launched on the first day. There was one that was a day later, I think on the 18th, there in Canada. Um, what's the ratio that you guys have between how much XRP you have to hold for each share in the spot ETF?
So basically, it all depends at what price we tend to start off. But basically, what our team does really well is basically is to try to be as close to spot as possible, right? And that's something that 3IQ has mastered. Even some of our products, basically compared to some of the big guys, people wonder like, how are you tracking spots
That,
so?
they've
Yeah,
that
yeah. And
was the huge disparity between how most people launch their product versus the spot prices,
yes.
the extra underlying that.
People aren't aware of the complexity of it. Oh, it's an ETF. So there's this whole settlement process that takes
Yeah,
place. So our team has become experts at reducing the cost to operate a fund, working with counterparties that want to work with 3IQ. So we tend to get best execution pricing. And we've been adding liquidity providers for years now. And so when we shop a price around at the end of the day to settle, we get the best
yes.
pricing, tight spreads, etc. And so it's when you combine all that together, our units per NAV, right, or our crypto assets per NAV are some of the best, if not the best in the industry. And so it's not sometimes people will always look at what's the cost of a product, who's the cheapest, who's got the most AUM. But if you're looking into the details and you're looking at units per NAV 3AQ, not only are we the cheapest product to market today, not only are we the largest, but we're also going to get you, I try to get, I have to be careful, try to get you, but we tend to pull it off the most assets per unit because of our experience and position in the marketplace.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, and you built this reputation and you have these partnerships. So you guys launched the Soul ETF there in Canada,
Yep.
and y'all went about it very innovative in comparison to everybody else. So you actually guys you didn't offer any fees. Is that accurate? Or you didn't charge any fees for the investment in that? Like everybody else, even BlackRock has low fees on the Bitcoin ETF here. You guys went zero. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, I mean, we have to look at what we're trying to do, right? So our as a company, we have a sort of a five-prong approach to support and scale the ecosystem, right? So some of our competition are just pure play asset managers, which means, hey, if the hot trade right now is covered call, S&P 500, ETFs, let's launch one, right? If it's, oh, treasuries are back up to 4%, let's launch a treasury ETF. Crypto is back on the in the news, let's launch a crypto ETF, right? So, uh, ETF issuers are ETF issuers. We're a digital asset manager. Uh, and our mission, and I was on another interview a few weeks ago. I say that the mission is super important because a lot of people at 3IQ are OGs, and they don't have to work, right? People have made their money because they've been early in the space. They work here, they're passionate here, they're cranking in the hours because they're passionate about driving the space forward. So ETFs were how we got started because it provided simplified access to
Yep.
the space, right? But our goal is much more than that. We do staking when staking is possible. We were the first to push that from a regulatory perspective because it secures the network for proof of stake networks. And if the ETFs are going to aggregate a lot of the AUM
You would
globally,
want that to be staked.
you want that to be staked. It's better for the investor, but that's how you secure the network, right? Our goal is also to bring institutions. So what does that mean? That means risk managed solutions. So we do have some active managed products to be able to bring some larger people in the space that may want exposure to the underlying, but in a risk managed way. We do sub advisory. So you'll be hearing 3IQ launch products with some big names attached to it because the big names want to catch up now. They're like, oh, BlackRock came in, Fidelity came in. So how do the Canadian banks come in? How do other global
Mhm.
players come in?
Yeah.
They need help. They all come to us because we're known in that space. And so that's how you drive the access space forward. That's how you drive sort of the institutional adoption forward. And finally, it's about giving back to the community. And so, yes, we have been very creative from a fee structure because we have a long-term vision and have been able to partner with the foundations, including Ripple Labs that have been an early supporter of 3IQ, to be able to drive costs very low to benefit the investor.
Yeah, which is incredible. I wish more people would take that approach. A lot of people are concerned about making fees today and cash flow, and rightly so, right? Like cash is the lifeblood of a business. But if you can curate those partnerships and be innovative and resourceful to be able to have that long-term vision when you're putting this together, I think that those are the people that end up winning out, right? And I think you guys,
And look, I mean, I built all my businesses on the triple bottom line. So you have to make money you need a cause, right?
yeah,
You need basically a purpose, right? You want to drive something forward. You need to make money to make that happen, and you need amazing people, right? And so everything we do, the fees we charge and where we charge them and how we do it is all a blend to say, okay, well, how can 3AQ continue? Because when I have all these individuals globally who are giving free education to institutions on a global scale, when I'm traveling and doing all these keynotes, that does require, time and commitment and a cost. Yes, it benefits 3IQ and our people if they work with us, but more importantly, it also benefits the community because if we could bring in, banks and asset managers and governments into the space and play our role. I'm not saying we're the only ones, but play a role in that. That's what drives our people.
yeah. Well, and I think y'all have been very successful at it. So on that, like, this is a fantastic vision and conversation. What's next on the roadmap for you guys? Is there something I don't know what you can talk about, what you can, but if you have anything that you would like to share, I think people would be interested. Is there some type of native yield mechanism on the XRP ETF that you guys are looking at, or something like that in the future? There's no DeFi for staking for that, but
Correct.
we do some innovative things on our side of the fence. So is it something y'all are looking at?
So we always, yeah. So absolutely, I can't share so
Yeah,
the complexity is what the regulators allow in an ETF,
right.
right? And so what we tend to do is, well, how do we tap into, the community and to other experts and test those yield mechanisms in non-ETF structures,
Right.
right? Prove a track record, demonstrate to the regulators that it can be done, and then wrap that into a framework that they're comfortable with, right? So for us right now, step one is give access. Step
Mhm.
two, what you will see is now that we have the four largest market cap, cryptocurrencies in the market within ETFs, um, this is going to unlock other big partnerships that we've been working with for a while that wanted to create baskets to unlock, their products. So you're going to see some big banks and asset managers coming to this space. Now you have single asset ETFs, you have hedging mechanisms, you have derivatives, you have staking. Uh, you have all the tools now to create sort of different
Yeah.
variable products to suit the market. And so 3IQ will be launching things with partners, big names to bring more people into the space. So you're going to see an acceleration of the wealth channels open up. And XRP was key to that because if you want to launch a basket, if you want to launch different
Right.
things, you need more than just one or two
Plugs.
ETFs.
Yeah.
So we were very adamant: staking, Solana, XRP, get the big four player market cap tokens out in ETF format. Work with the regular. So that's what's coming up next. Then longer term, it's going to be yield mechanism. So step one was, serve the community, so that we could launch and bring institutions in the space. Phase two, monetize those assets for everyone. Because when we do monetize the assets, a lot of it goes back to the investor, and then some of it goes to us.
Dividend, or yeah, it's mutually beneficial, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's super cool. So I've always wondered, like, why isn't there a Bitcoin ETF that just has options that hedge to the downside? Packaged together to be able to mitigate the risk for loss, because it's a volatile asset. This whole space is $3 trillion in current market cap. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of liquidity moving in and out of the space to have big fluctuations in prices for a lot of these assets.
So this will be the trend that you're going to see as more active management in public liquid vehicles.
Okay.
The conversations we're having with the big players, how like no one wants to launch just another Bitcoin ETF. to compete with BlackRock,
Been there.
right? It's
Yeah.
yeah, how do we create something that's a little bit different that could enable the next wave of users? So imagine like the wealth channels or the RIA or advisor channels in Canada. So how do you make it easier for them to say, "Hey, I'm putting you in a product that my bank or my firm manages, along with the top player, one of the top players globally, 3AQ, in a diversified portfolio, risk managed, right? So, so that you can sleep at night saying, I'm getting exposure to a broad based, I don't have to worry about that. I picked the winning asset, that I picked the winning ETP. It's all
S&P 500 of crypto, right?
so those things are coming. Risk managed to the downside's coming. You're seeing more and more of that. Yield harvesting, you're seeing some of those. So all those things will help. Again, and they may not be pure plays, but they're going to bring more people into the space. And then when you come into the space, you get more educated. And then when you get more educated, you discover the winners. And then you're like, I want exposure to the winners. So it always, you got to
Ends up
flow with
there.
it
Yeah.
to the opposite. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've seen some other assets that have been proposed or S1s filed here in the US, including Litecoin, Doge, and HBAR. Any of those in the future? Or you're done with these four and now you're looking to kind of move to this more of an indexed product.
Yeah, so our view for us is we've positioned ourselves as an institutional focused player. Now, these are retail accessible products, don't get me wrong. But we want to build things that serve the community, that serve the retail environment, of course, yes, but that also allows us to build Lego blocks to be
Do
that
something later.
institutional player, right? And so going further down into single asset ETPs in North America, I don't know how it's going to happen in the US. In Canada, will be very difficult within the regulatory regime that we have. That may change based on what happens in the US, but right now, because of the work we've done, originally they were all single, sort of basically case by case regulator decisions. Now we have a framework in mind. That framework's been approved. So now we know
Mhm.
what they will or will not approve, which has been a game changer. So longer term, we probably gonna see more basket approach instead of single,
Yep.
winners, unless one becomes big enough in market cap where there's enough demand to justify that. But
Okay.
definitely what regulators would deem as a meme coin is not on the roadmap for with the regulators in
No,
Canada.
no Doge, huh? Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, very interesting. And I like people. So the way that we built our business is very similar. Like you got to lay the groundwork. You got to do things foundationally. They're going to set you up for a bigger play later on. And sometimes you forego things. You have loss leaders. You have stuff in place to be able to generate relationships and small revenues to be able to add up to
Yeah.
a larger vision, right? Which it sounds exactly like what you guys have done. And now you've curated these partnerships. You've positioned yourselves well, and now we have the regulatory environment that I think you guys are going to be very successful in. So, outside of those things and some of the stuff we've discussed, like anything else you're super excited about in the space?
Well, I mean, I think it's finally there's that moment in time in a technology or any kind of revolution, right? Where you have I share this in my keynote. You have the hype cycle, right? Money comes in, and we
Yeah.
big VC comes in that builds out the infrastructure, right? There tends to be a bubble moment. Funny enough, like I was at a my first public speaking event as president and CEO of the firm 4 years ago. I literally said this. I said, I've seen this in my career twice now. I don't know when this is going to happen, but usually when you see high valuations, lots of venture capital, not enough deal flow, what happens is you have bubble territory, things blow up. But what you do have is enough capital resources that will build the foundation for the future. Well, we lived that 6 months
Yeah.
after I
Good
started
timing on that.
all that, right? So I was like, okay, well, go rewatch that video. Now where are we now? We're in the what I call the very exciting phase. Like, you're not seeing the news all the time, right? So the sort of the hype cycle of the news is not necessarily there. But what's happened is the building kept going. The institutions are truly here, and so to me, we're circa 2003 of the internet bubble. So what happened after Web 2, right? After the bubble blew up, right? You had those capital dollars that helped build the infrastructure of the future. So the vision was real, the timing was off. And so that vision of Web 2 came to life with the Googles and the YouTubes and the Amazons and everything else, right? So here we are. The vision of where things were going was always going to be true. The timing was off. And so where are we now? We're in the slow, the slowly and then suddenly moment, I believe.
Yeah.
And so
The time to pick the winners is now. If you can get in now on some of this stuff that's
now
out
the
there.
the winners are now, right? The what's being built on these are now proven. You know where the action's happening. You know where the partnerships are forming. You know which banks are adopting which ledgers to build up on top. Like if you do a bit of research,
No,
just a bit, you'll see where that's happening. And so the choice is yours. That do you go into the next thing because you think you missed out, or do you pick the winners and let your winners ride? Because I remember, again, not financial advice, but in 2003 everyone was saying, I guess we missed out on Google when they IPO'd. I guess the money was already made. If you bought in at the IPO and you to today, I mean, Google has been a
yeah,
racehorse,
for sure.
right? And so here's where we are now. We have clear regulatory, sort of, path forwards in most jurisdictions. The the last few cycles where technology were being developed, you didn't know who the winners were going to be. Now you could see who's building on what, where's the
Mhm.
volume, where's the action. And so now and now the sovereigns, the governments, and the banks are coming in and building on top of that. And so again, in my opinion, we're circa 2003. What does that mean? That means that the winners are clear, follow the trend, and the next 20 years should be pretty impressive in the space, not just from a financial performance perspective, but from the vision
Option.
becoming true of the
Yeah,
tech.
the actual implementation of this technology at scale across different industries and the efficiencies that it's going to create, the
Yeah,
completely revolutionize the way that we transact value and data moves and all the stuff that happened with the internet all over.
100%. It just always takes longer than we think, right? But here we are. Yeah.
Well, like until it doesn't, until you have that breakthrough moment, and then
Yes.
things, yeah, kick
Well,
off.
the old, so we call it the Chat GPT moment. It's like they're like, "Oh, AI is real." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been doing AI for 20 years." It was called machine learning. It wasn't as impressive as it is today, but AI wasn't invented when ChatGPT launched. That just became the retail moment where everyone's like, "Oh,
Ah,
this is real." But if you were in the technology space, like we've been
it was
using
in for a
machine learning
decade.
for years. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Well, if people want to participate in the ETF there in Canada or learn more about what you guys do, what's the ticker, and then where can they do that at?
Yeah, so the ticker is XRPQ, and so all of our products end with our branded names, so BTCQ, ETHQ, SOLQ, and XRPQ. Um, if they want to learn more, they can visit 3iq.io and basically see all our product pages, see a little bit of our history, read a bit more of our mission and our team. Our marketing team is very active on LinkedIn and X and other social channels. And yeah, we're just out there a lot trying to educate, trying to spread the word, and try to support the community the best way we know how.
I love that, brother. Well, we'll see you guys at Salt in person here in the near
Yes.
future.
Are you going?
Yeah, we'll be there.
Yeah, we're excited about that. Yes, we've been we've been good friends and good allies with the Salt team for a while, and so we were there in Bermuda a few months ago, and I'm going to see you in Jackson Hole then.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it. So we'll have the links that you mentioned there in the show notes for people. And hopefully the ETF does well. What just out of curiosity before we wrap up, what was the first day inflow for you guys?
So the first day, well, I know where we are today. I just got the numbers, so let me share you with you those the accurate number because it's been 2 days or wait, we're Friday. It's been 3 days, and so we are at. I'll give you the U.S. dollars. Yeah, so we're about 24 million
Right.
after a few days. So that's a very similar trend that we saw with Solana in terms of retail flow. So we're seeing good demand. Um, you know, it's still new in terms of like people just the news as it's been a slow day. It's been a holiday in the U.S. It's been Canada. So we're seeing that, but the news is getting out, and we're seeing an uptrend in terms of the digital channels and the reshare. And so we're probably going to see a bigger push next week as people realize that there actually is a product out there because news doesn't always make it around the world from Canada, but these are accessible. If you have access to the TSX, you have access to the products.
Good to go. Well, again, thank you for taking the time to join me, Pascal.
Absolutely. Anytime.